There are women who never know when to leave. She had everything a side chick could possibly desire: money, presents, and luxury. For her, though, that was insufficient. She wanted more. She desired the wife's job. She also learns the hard way when a woman like her crosses her limits. Betrayal is not always forgiven by men. It only took one call, one stupid call. She was gone in an instant. No justice, no body, no traces. There is only one question that remains. Did she cause her own demise, or was she a victim? Here at the Crime Hour, welcome. I sincerely appreciate the steadfast support of my subscribers and viewers. Discover the most compelling true crime tales, both told and untold, every day. Stay informed by subscribing and hit the bell icon now. Let's start the story. Rashad Carter wasn't just a name in the street, she was a legend. The kind of man whose mere presence commanded fear and respect. He didn't inherit wealth. He built his empire brick by brick, deal by deal, and body by body. Starting at the bottom, he was a young hustler running packages for men who would later beg for his protection. While others played checkers, Rashad played chess. Every move was calculated, every decision had a purpose. By his 30s, he was untouchable. His name alone could shut down entire blocks, and when he spoke, people listened not because they wanted to, but because they knew the consequences of disobedience. Rashad didn't tolerate weakness, betrayal, or anyone making him look like a fool. But if there was one thing he valued above all, one thing he'd never gamble with, it was his wife, Nyla. Nyla wasn't just his woman. She was his foundation. The only person who had stood by him when he had nothing back, when he was hustling out of a rundown apartment, scraping together a future. She had seen the blood, the struggle, the sacrifices. She never asked questions, never wavered, never demanded more than what he was willing to give. And because of that, he gave her everything: mansions, cars, jewelry, power. She was the only woman who could walk into a room full of men who feared him and hold her head high, untouched and unchallenged. But a man is still a man. Rashad convinced himself that stepping outside his marriage wasn't betrayal, it was just a perk of the life he built, something powerful men do. A way to remind himself that no matter how much he gave to one woman, he could still have others. As long as Nyla never knew, there was no issue. That was the rule, the only rule. And that's exactly what he told the women he entertained. He didn't sugarcoat it, didn't make promises, didn't lie about leaving his wife. He made it clear. They would never be more than what they were. They could enjoy the lifestyle, the attention, the gifts, but the moment they forgot their place, they'd lose it all. When he met Alia Parker, she seemed to understand the arrangement. She played the role well at first, never called too much, never asked for more than what he gave. But Rashad should have known better. Some women don't settle for second place. Some don't understand the boundaries they were never meant to cross. And Alia, she was one of them. Rashad ran his empire with precision, and he expected the same control over his personal life. What happens in the dark stays in the dark, that's how he operated. And anyone who disrupted that order didn't live long enough to do it again. Alia Parker was the kind of woman who refused to stay in the background. She always knew what she wanted: power, luxury, and a man who could give her both. At 27, she had spent enough time around the right people to understand how the game was played. She had watched women fall into the trap of being disposable, treated like accessories to men with money and influence. But Alia wasn't like them. She wasn't satisfied with temporary affection, fleeting moments, or expensive gifts that could be snatched away the moment a man lost interest. She wanted security. She wanted a title. And when she met Rashad Carter, she saw her golden ticket. It wasn't by chance that she ended up at the Atrium, an exclusive lounge that catered only to the city's most elite criminals, businessmen, and power players. She had been invited by a woman who had once been at the top back when she was the main woman for a cartel boss. But that woman had made a mistake. She had demanded too much, thinking love could outweigh power, and she was cast aside, like she never mattered. Alia took notes. She wasn't about to make the same mistake. The night Rashad walked into the lounge, she felt the shift in the room before she even saw him. Conversations quieted, heads turned. He didn't need to announce himself, his presence did that for him. He wasn't flashy, didn't wear loud designer brands or excessive jewelry like the others. He exuded wealth without needing to prove it. He was the kind of man who moved in silence, controlling everything without ever raising his voice. Alia knew men like him didn't chase women. They expected women to chase them. That's why she did the opposite. She made sure to sit in his direct line of sight, but never looked his way. She laughed at her friend's jokes, sipped her drink slowly, and pretended not to notice when Rashad's eyes landed on her. She made him come to her, and he did. One conversation turned into a private meeting. A private meeting turned into late-night calls, secret meetups, and expensive gifts. She played her role perfectly, never asking for too much, never making him feel like she was a burden. She made herself indispensable. She convinced Rashad that she was the kind of woman who knew her place, who wouldn't cause problems. But in her mind, she was plotting. Unlike the other women who came and went, Alia wanted more. She wanted to replace Nyla. She saw herself wearing the crown, walking beside Rashad, not behind him, and she knew exactly how to make it happen. One night, after another secret rendezvous, she started feeling different. At first, she ignored a little nausea, a little fatigue, nothing serious. But when it didn't go away, something in her gut told her to check. She stopped by a pharmacy on the way home, bought a pregnancy test, and took it the second she walked into her apartment. 2 lines. She was pregnant. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the test. A slow smile spread across her lips. This was it. This was her way in. Rashad had no choice now. For weeks, she kept it to herself, waiting for the perfect moment. She knew she had to play it right. If she told him too soon, he might try to make her get rid of it. If she waited too long, she risked losing control of the situation. She had to make it work in her favor. She convinced herself that this child would be the key to everything. If she was carrying Rashad's baby, that meant she had leverage. That meant she wasn't just another woman in his life, she was family. And in his world, family was untouchable. But there was one thing Alia didn't consider. Rashad was not the kind of man who could be forced into anything. He had already warned her, stay in your place, or there would be consequences. She thought she had the upper hand. She thought she had locked in her future. But what she didn't realize was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Rashad had always been careful. He didn't make mistakes, didn't leave room for error. Everything in his life was calculated, including the women he entertained. He had a rule. What happens in the dark stays there. He expected discipline, control. He expected women to know their place. But Alia wasn't like the others. She didn't just want to be a secret, she wanted to be the queen. And when she realized Rashad wasn't going to hand her the crown, she decided to take it for herself. The moment presented itself in a way that seemed almost too easy. Rashad had just finished an intense conversation when his phone buzzed again. It was his right-hand man, a call he couldn't ignore. He picked up the phone, listening intently, his expression unreadable. In the middle of the call, something else grabbed his attention, one of his men signaling him from the other room. Without thinking, Rashad dropped the call and left his phone on the couch as he walked away. Alia's heart pounded. She knew better than to touch his phone. Rashad wasn't the type of man to play about his privacy. But in that moment, she saw an opening. She hesitated for only a second before snatching the phone and swiping up. The screen was still unlocked. She had seconds. She scrolled through contacts, tapping into them, moving fast. Her eyes darted over the names until she found it. Nyla Carter. She didn't have time to think. She memorized the number, repeating it in her head, forcing herself to remember it before the screen went dark. Just as she heard Rashad's footsteps approaching, she quickly placed the phone back where he left it and leaned back against the couch like nothing had happened. She had it now, the direct line to the one woman standing in her way. Later that night, she sat in her apartment, staring at the number she had written down. A glass of wine sat untouched beside her. She didn't need liquid courage. She was ready. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She smirked. She wasn't scared. If anything, she was excited. She tapped the screen. The phone rang once, twice, then a voice answered. Cool, calm, collected. Hello. For a second, Alia didn't speak. She expected Nyla to sound broken, to sound weak. But there was no hesitation in her voice. No fear. Alia's lips curled into a smile. She leaned back in her chair, twirling a strand of her hair between her fingers. I just thought you should know. she said, her tone dripping with amusement. Your husband and I have been together for over a year now. And guess what? I'm pregnant. Silence. Alia smirked, waiting for a reaction. She had rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times. She imagined Nyla crying, begging, losing her composure. She wanted to hear the heartbreak, the anger. But instead nothing. Alia continued. I called because I think it's time for you to step aside. Rashad doesn't love you anymore. You were his past. I'm his future. And I'm calling to let you know you're wasting your time if you think he's going to stay with you. Still no response. Alia's confidence grew. She laughed, mocking the woman on the other end of the line. Be smart about this, Nyla. You already lost. Rashad deserves a woman who can give him a real family. My baby isn't about to be a bastard. He needs a mother and father married. She waited for Nyla to crack, but Nyla stayed quiet. Then finally, a soft exhale. Alia frowned slightly, not expecting the next words that came. Are you finished? Alia blinked. Nyla's voice was so calm, so controlled it threw her off for a second. Alia swallowed, irritation creeping in. Did you hear what I said? I said I'm having your husband's baby. I heard you, Nyla replied. Is that all? Alia gritted her teeth. This wasn't the reaction she wanted. She wanted rage, screaming, desperation. But Nyla wasn't giving her any of it. She sat up, her voice turning sharp. I'm not playing with you, Nyla. You need to get a divorce. Rashad is mine now. This time, Nyla let out a small laugh. It was quiet, almost like she was amused. And then she said something that made Alia's blood run cold. You think you're the first? Alia froze. I've been Rashad's wife for 10 years, Nyla continued, her tone steady. You think I don't know how this works? You think you're special? Alia clenched her jaw. You made 2 mistakes, Nyla interrupted. First, you thought you could replace me. Second, you called me. That was the real mistake. Alia's stomach twisted. Nyla's voice dropped lower, her words slow and deliberate. You have no idea what you just did. Then, the line went dead. Alia stared at her phone, the silence in the room suddenly feeling heavy. For the first time since she started playing this game, she felt something she wasn't used to doubt. She should have known. She had just sealed her fate. Nyla didn't say a word that night. She had every opportunity to confront him, to ask him if there was something he needed to tell her, but she didn't. She had been Rashad's wife for too long to act on emotions. This wasn't about catching him in a lie, it was about watching him lie to her face. She knew how he operated, how his mind worked. A man like Rashad never admitted to his wrongs unless he had no other option. And she wasn't about to give him the chance to talk his way out of this. So she waited. Rashad came home like nothing had happened. He moved as he always did, cool, composed, in control. He ate, showered, climbed into bed beside her like he didn't just put his entire life in danger. She felt the weight of his arm over her, steady and familiar. But now, all she felt was disgust. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing as he drifted off to sleep. He had no idea. The next morning started like any other. Rashad moved through his routine early wake-up, checking his phone, making quiet calls, running through his schedule for the day. Nyla acted normal, playing her role perfectly. She wasn't going to be the one to tell him. She wanted to see how long he would keep up the lie. But Rashad never got the chance. Just as he was preparing to leave, his right-hand man Tark approached him. His expression was unreadable. Tark wasn't the type to bring gossip or speak on things that didn't matter. If he was bringing this up, it was serious. Yo, Tark's voice was low, controlled. But there was something behind it, something that said, you need to hear this. Rashad barely glanced up from his phone. What's up? Tark didn't hesitate. Alia called Nyla. Silence. Rashad's hands stopped moving. His jaw locked. He blinked slowly, turning his head toward Tark. What? His voice was quiet, but there was something in it that made Tark keep his stance firm. She told her everything, Tark said, still calm, watching Rashad's reaction closely. The affair, the pregnancy. Rashad's stomach dropped. His head snapped up fully now, eyes narrowing. Tark exhaled, nodding slightly. That's what she told Nyla, that she was pregnant with Rashad's child. Sent a shockwave through him. Rashad's body stiffened, his fingers gripping the phone so tightly it was a miracle it didn't shatter. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. No, this couldn't be right. Alia couldn't be pregnant. It wasn't supposed to happen. He had always been cautious, meticulous even. Every time he was with a woman outside of Nyla, he ensured there were no loose ends, no proof, no evidence, no leverage. After every encounter, he handed them the same pill without fail. It was a rule, non-negotiable. So how was this happening? Was she lying? Or had she outsmarted him? His breathing grew heavier, his mind torn between disbelief and fury. Tark watched it unfold the way Rashad's mind raced, his emotions threatening to shatter his composed facade. How do you know all this? Rashad's voice was low, strained. Tark nodded toward his phone. Nyla called Kesha, told her everything. Kesha, Tark's woman, wasn't exactly Nyla's friend, but they moved in the same circles. When Nyla needed to talk, she confided in the woman, who understood life with a man like Rashad. Kesha, in turn, told Tark. That meant Nyla was talking, and Rashad's business was no longer private. He glanced down at his phone, thumb hovering over Nyla's contact, but he didn't call. Instead, he looked back at Tark, his voice calm but laced with danger. Where is she? Tark didn't need to ask who he meant. Still at her place. She thinks she's won. Rashad exhaled sharply. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Alia hadn't just crossed a line, she had obliterated it. She hadn't just betrayed him, she had disrespected him. And there was only one way to handle that. Rashad sat in his car, hands clenched around the steering wheel, his mind eerily silent but dangerous. He had replayed it 100 times, trying to figure out how he'd let this happen. How a woman he never intended to keep had managed to corner him like this. But Rashad wasn't one for regrets. What was done. Now, he had to clean it up. He picked up his phone, scrolled to Alia's number, and hit dial. It rang twice before she answered. Hey, baby. Her voice was light, teasing, overly confident. Rashad kept his tone smooth, calm, but with just enough emotion to sell it. Let's talk. I've made up my mind. There was a pause. He could hear her excitement in the way she inhaled, already picturing the future she thought she had won. You did? She asked, trying to sound casual but failing to hide her eagerness. Yeah, Rashad said. Let's meet up, just us. That was all she needed to hear. Alia grinned on the other end, unaware she had just sealed her fate. Okay, she said quickly. When? Tonight? I knew you'd come around, she added, her voice dripping with satisfaction. Rashad didn't respond. They settled on a time and place somewhere. Private, quiet, somewhere she wouldn't walk away from. Alia hung up, grinning as she tossed her phone onto the bed. She felt invincible. Everything had gone exactly as planned. She grabbed her phone again, typing out a text to her friend. It's happening. I'll be Mrs. Carter soon. She hovered over the send button, but hesitated. Something told her to wait, not out of suspicion, but because she wanted to confirm it first. She wanted to hear Rashad say it to her face, to see him tell her Nyla was out of the picture, to feel the moment she officially won. Instead of hitting send, she locked her phone and went to get ready. She would never get the chance to send that text. Alia arrived at the secluded location, the night air thick with anticipation. She stepped out of her car, adjusting her dress, smiling to herself. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. She had won. She was about to secure her future. She walked toward the dimly lit spot where Rashad stood, his silhouette sharp against the glow of the street lamp. He was already there, hands in his pockets, unmoving, watching. She didn't notice the darkness in his eyes, the stillness in his body. She only saw what she wanted to see, a man coming to claim her. She chuckled softly, tilting her head. I knew you'd come around, she said, her voice sweet, laced with triumph. Rashad didn't respond. He didn't nod, smile, or give her anything. His expression remained unchanged. Alia slowed her steps, her confidence faltering for the first time. Something felt off, but she pushed past it. This was Rashad. She took another step closer, but then his voice cut through the silence, cold and sharp. You really thought you could play me? Her breath caught. What? She asked, forcing a laugh as if he were joking. But Rashad wasn't joking. He took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. You thought you could go behind my back, call my wife? Alia's stomach twisted. She opened her mouth to speak, but a gunshot ripped through the night. The impact sent her body jerking backward, her hands flying to her stomach, eyes wide in shock. Her legs buckled, and she crumpled to the ground, gasping for air. She tried to speak, to reach out, but Rashad just stared down at her, unmoved. "You did this to yourself," he muttered. Alia's lips parted, a choked sound escaping, but no words followed. Her game was over. Within seconds, Rashad's men emerged from the shadows, already knowing what needed to be done. "Get rid of her," Rashad ordered, his voice cold, detached. They moved quickly, efficiently, no traces, no evidence, just a missing woman. Nyla had always known the truth, even before the call that confirmed it. She wasn't naive. She was a wife who understood the world she had married into. Rashad was powerful, untouchable in the streets, and men like him didn't operate within the rules of loyalty the way regular men did. She had accepted that long ago, but she had one rule: if you must cheat, don't let me find out, and never let your side chick contact me. She didn't ask questions, go through his phone, or demand explanations. As long as she remained his only queen, his only wife, the one who held the throne, she was willing to look the other way. But Alia broke the rule, and Rashad let it happen. A part of her had expected him to handle it, but she didn't expect the weight of it to hit so soon. Alia didn't just disappear. She was erased. And Nyla knew exactly who was responsible. For a while, she said nothing. She watched Rashad move like nothing had happened, like he hadn't disrespected her, like he hadn't made her the last to know. He still came home, still laid beside her, still touched her like he hadn't betrayed everything they had built. That was when she realized this wasn't love anymore. A week later, she made a decision. She leaked the affair herself, not through gossip or whispers, but through evidence. She made sure the right people found out detectives who had been looking for a reason to bring Rashad down. She didn't need to give them everything, just enough to make them start asking questions. A trace of Alia's last phone call, a piece of information about where she was last seen, a quiet anonymous tip that placed Rashad exactly where he didn't need to be. She didn't do it just because of the affair. She did it because he broke his word. He had warned Alia about crossing the line, but what he failed to realize was that Nyla had warned him too. She wasn't the type of woman to beg or cry over betrayal. She was the type to remind a man exactly who he was dealing with. Do you think she was right to betray him, or should she have stood by him? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like, share it with others, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more impactful stories. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.